I want to assure you that this is what is called a quasi-judicial meeting, and that means that no decisions have been taken regarding anything on this agenda in advance of the meeting. Members of the planning committee sit not as ward councillors, but as representatives of the council overall. I can also confirm that members of the planning committee have received specific mandatory planning committee training to enable them to sit on the committee today. Members who have not completed that training will not be able to vote on any planning application until their training has been completed. I should also remind members that we don't enjoy parliamentary privilege, and so we should be mindful of the comments that we make during the course of this meeting. A number of people are here because you've stated that you wish to speak on a planning application. Those planning applications are going to be dealt with on an area basis as we move through the agenda. Can I remind those people who are speaking to limit their contributions to 3 minutes, and we'll give you indications of the timings of those. Can I also remember both members of the committee and the public to switch off your mobile phones during the meeting? I'd also tell you that, remind you that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed on the web. I'm not going to give you the YouTube coordinates of that. It's a bit too complicated, but that is happening. We've dealt with item 1. I should also say that members of the press or public may record and take photographs of the meeting, except in the case of confidential or exempt items. So we move on to item 2, which is the declaration of interest. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to item 11, it is in Erdington Wards, and I have been contacted by a number of residents in relation to it. So I shall still be taking part. And then in relation to item 15, I am a trustee of the Birmingham LGBT charity referred to within the report. I've been involved in those discussions, so I will not be taking part in that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Moore. Marshall.
Item 16, I privately rent in a building in the opposite development, but I'm not impacted by it or it's in sight, and I'm only a tenant there for another couple of months, so I will take part. And item 19 is partially in my ward, but I've not been contacted about it, and I will take part in that as well.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Rainbow.
Item 14, the MP for Edgbaston has objected to the application. I work for that MP and have had conversations about that, so I won't be taking part in that.
Okay. Any other declarations? Can we therefore move to apologies? I've had an apology from Councillor Jane Jones for lateness. She may join us later in the meeting. Councillor Moore.
Apologies from Councillor Barry.
Item 4 is appointment of planning committee members, chair and deputy chair. So item 1 is to note the decision of the City Council on the 24th of May. And item 2, to elect a deputy chair. Can I move that that Councillor Azim is appointed to that post? Does anyone wish to second that? Thanks. Any other nominations?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Lee Marshall.
Councillor Marshall, do you accept that nomination?
No, thank you, I'm very honoured.
So Councillor Azim has been nominated and seconded. That's agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 5. You note the functions, duties and powers laid down on the agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Item 6, Chair's announcements. I don't have any. Item 7 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April. Is it agreed that I confirm and sign those minutes?
Agreed.
You agree to that? Thank you. Item 8, dates of meetings for the 22-23. You requested to approve the recommended dates that are laid down on the agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So we're on to planning applications now. Applications for the northwest area. First one being item 9, relating to Chainwall Laselles Road, Birchfield Road. Okay. I was going to.
Yes, yeah.
Can I, on item 9, can I ask if there are any updates on this particular application?
Thank you, Chair. There are no updates on this particular application.
I understand there are no members of the public in respect of this application. So can I invite members of the committee for any debate or questions? Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I think it's good to see the proposal is 100% affordable homes. Looking at it, like it's good design, and in the bigger picture, it's on the stretch of road that's near the ongoing regeneration of Perry Barn. I think it will add to the overall area of that part of North Birmingham. So I'm mindful to agree.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 7.28, it refers to the parking arrangements for it, and it says there are 8 proposed. Given this is going to be aimed at older people, whilst that may be suitable for residents, I don't think it's taken into account visiting arrangements, particularly if these people require carers or have family who care for them or have people who wish to come and visit them. Traditionally, that is quite common with older people that will take place. And I know from previous applications where the parking arrangements have been insufficient to accommodate that. So has that been fully taken into account as part of the parking assessment?
Other questions or comments?
Chair, I'd just like to comment. I welcome the provision of housing for elderly this age group because there's insufficient.
Councillor Azim.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's very good, especially for the people who are over age. And I think we desperately need some more housing for such people like that. And I think that's very good development in there, and that will be good for the future of the city. So I'm in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair. I just welcome this. I think as I represent the netting book, and I think this site was pending for some time, and it's about time that we can the journey going on there, and I welcome this.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there are a lot of positive comments, which is something that officers agree with. Let's say that we do consider this a good news story in many ways in the delivery of this type of accommodation on a sort of vacant brownfield site in a very sustainable location. The point made by Councillor Moore is a very valid point. It's a very relevant point. It is something which we, as officers, looked at during the consideration of the application in coordination with our colleagues in transportation. We did have a few concerns about the parking provision, though the applicant did come along with detailed analysis of their experience from similar types of schemes and also just their general experience. It is recognised that the level of car ownership is likely to be relatively low for the occupiers, and the parking is most likely to be used by visitors and maybe those few residents who do have parking. So we are satisfied with the level parking provision. There is a condition in the recommendation which talks about entering into agreements with authority to look at the suitability of potentially providing a QRL on Chainwall. And I suppose it's also important to emphasise that it is in an incredibly sustainable location next to the A34 and the public transport infrastructure in that location. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Are you prepared now to move to a vote on the recommendations which are in paragraph 9? Do we put this in? Do we vote on this? No. Okay, so can I see all those in favour of the application?
So there are no.
Okay, thank you for that. Move on to item 10. Okay, sorry, I should confirm to members of the public that that application has been approved. Thank you. So we move on to item 10, which is the report relating to 4 Carlton Close, Sutton Coldfield.
So this does have members of the public.
Yeah, I'll just explain to you how this is going to be dealt with. I'll first of all invite the officers to give us any updates on the case following the publication of the agenda. I'll then invite the objector to come forward. Remind again that you have 3 minutes. We'll remind you when you've got 1 minute left to speak. I'll then invite the supporter of the proposal to come forward with the same provisions in terms of speaking for 3 minutes. I'll then seek any clarification from officers, and then I'll put it to debate to the members of the committee, and then invite officers to make a response. Once that's been done, we'll move to the vote on the recommendation. Is that clear? Okay, so can we start with any updates on the case?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of updates, we do have a couple of updates to report. We have received a further representation from the Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council, advising that their previous objections to the applications remain. We've also received a further representation from a local resident, reiterating previous objections and also adding that the plans don't mention the height of the houses and to consider the environmental impact of demolishing a perfectly good house. Just quickly in response to those additional points raised, scale is a matter reserved for later consideration under a reserved matters application, though the indicative plans do show 2-storey houses which also utilise the roof space, so in essence creates 3 levels of accommodation, but within a 2-storey house. In terms of the environmental impact of demolition is recognised, though this needs to be balanced against the more efficient use of land in an appropriate manner and in an appropriate location, and also within the context of the council's current 5-year housing land supply, all of which hold significant weight. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Can I therefore invite the objector on this application to come forward and speak? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of a large number of residents in Carlton Close, Honeybourne Road, Bedford Road and Tamworth Road to object to this proposal. On density, we're very concerned that the benchmark in the final planning report is taken from the 4 houses built on the plot of 2 Carlton Close. This is the most recent infill multi-development in the close, and it gained approval only when significantly reduced in scope following objections from highways and the emergency services. We believe this planning history is relevant and appears to have been ignored. The density of buildings on this benchmark plot is significantly greater than the norm for all surrounding houses in the locality. The application before this committee squeezes 7 4 or 5 bedroom houses, 3 stories an access road and a turning point onto 2/3 of an acre. The developer has consistently failed to identify the height of the houses proposed, and they would be the only 3-storey houses built in the locality. A refuse bin location area has been added against the fence of 6 Carlton Close because there is insufficient space on individual house plots. The narrow parking spaces are inadequate for the size of cars nowadays, as identified in the highways objection. On safety, we're very concerned that the final planning report attaches so little weight to objections from highways and the fire service, given the previous record of concern and the fact that road traffic, on-road parking and difficulty for emergency vehicle access have all increased in recent years, particularly from the impact of Good Hope Hospital. The amended plan reduces the width of the access road to the proposed development to 4.5 metres, with no pavement for pedestrians, and creates a double bottleneck that severely restricts emergency vehicle access, particularly when cars are parked consistently on one side of the single-track access road from Honeybourne to Carlton Close.
1 minute left.
Errors in the original technical papers submitted by the developer remain uncorrected. Invasion of, and there they are mentioned in various objections. Invasion of privacy is of significant concern to residents of Tamworth Road and 6 Carlton Close, not only because of the 3-storey proposal, but also because of their elevated position. We request that the committee visits the site to see for themselves what is giving rise to such concern from all but the few residents involved in selling their gardens to this project. The strength of local feeling is registered in the size of the 2 petitions submitted, and it is our view that Carlton Close has already reached the capacity for infill, and we stress the safety concerns raised. We ask you to refuse this application.
Your contribution.
Thank you.
Can I invite now the supporter of the application to come forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Paul Harris. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and speak today on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to start by thanking your officers for their constructive feedback and assistance during the course of the application, and naturally I fully endorse the positive recommendation they have reached. I'm conscious that you have a very thorough committee report in front of you, which is unequivocal in its recommendation for approval. I therefore intend to be brief and do my best to avoid repeating points that have already been made by your officers. The application, as you've just heard, has attracted the interest of nearby residents. You've heard from the speaker before me about some of these concerns. Of course, as you know, developments of any size will invariably create a degree of apprehension, and the concerns need to be assessed against the relevant policies and weighed in the overall planning balance. Ultimately, we have here a well-designed, responsive scheme which adds to the city's housing stock, complies with all relevant standards that are in place to ensure satisfactory standards of amenity for both existing and future residents. And members will note that the Council's expert design consultee has advocated the layout that you see before you today. Members will also note that there are no technical objections for any statutory consultee that cannot be overcome via a condition or through the reserved matters application process. And moreover, that all development plan policies are complied with. Accordingly, I ask that members support their officers today in resolving to grant planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Can I ask for clarification from officers on those contributions?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to our speakers this morning. It's fair to say that there's been quite significant representation on this application, and that can be seen within the report in front of you. The report also includes a history of the application site, but as members will be aware, each application has to be assessed on its own individual merits. So just for clarity, this is an outline application with only access to be considered at this point. Issues of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping would form part of a separate reserved matters application. Going to principles, there is no objection in principle to new residential development in an established residential area within a sustainable location that represents a more efficient use of land. However, each application still needs to be subject to site-specific considerations, and that can include things like character, impact on neighbour amenity and highway matters. In terms of the character of the site, it's a post-war cul-de-sac. It's very much a post-war cul-de-sac character, and the housing is of a relatively low density. The existing house itself sits within a very generous plot, and the site also incorporates, as indicated by the speakers, lower sections of neighbours' gardens. So the indicative plan, and it is indicative, contained within the officer's report, shows the creation of 7 detached houses in a form that very much represents a continuation of the cul-de-sac, very much takes design cues from numbers 2A and 2D. And if members take a look at the ordnance survey plan at the end of their report, to the immediate south of the application site, they'll see numbers 2A to number 2D directly to the south of the application site. So the scheme is very much looking to continue that kind of arrangement and that level of density. In terms of the relationship to neighbours, this is also considered acceptable by officers, and ultimately it's important to recognise that the final detail, the finer detail as well, the final and finer detail would form part of a reserve matters application and address matters of the final layout, the final scale, final appearance and landscaping. And just to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this item, the scale is a reserve matters, but the indicative plans do show 2 detached 2 dwelling houses, which includes accommodation within the roof space. On issues of highways, we've consulted with our colleagues in transportation. They raised no objections. They did raise some concerns about the width of the parking spaces, which are shown at 2.65, but 2.65 metres. But it's important for members to recognise that that level of detail is not in consideration at this point. That would form part of the reserve matters application, so there's no grounds to refuse the application on that particular matter. In terms of the refuge storage, a refuge storage shown on the indicative plan is in that location to reflect the needs of the council's refuge service. So generally, the refuge collectors will not go more than 25 metres beyond the public footpath. So it's to address the need of the refuge service. I've covered the issue about the parking space width. And in terms of the fire service, yes, the fire service raised some concerns about whether this would create a cul-de-sac of a greater length than 180 metres. The indicative plans show that from the entrance of the cul-de-sac, the existing cul-de-sac, to the end of the new road serving this new development, it would be less than 180 metres. We've also taken into consideration that within the cul-de-sac, the existing cul-de-sac, there are in essence 2 turning heads. One where the cul-de-sac veers to the left, and also where the new access would go, and also to the far left of the cul-de-sac at a distance about 210 metres from the entrance of the cul-de-sac. So we do feel within that context that there are no highway safety concerns. So just to conclude, members, officers feel that there are no grounds for refusal of this application. And it's also important to note that the current situation we have in terms of the 5-year housing land supply, that does in addition add extra weight to the application being approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification. Can I now throw it open to members for questions or comments on the application? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I note at 7.12 that transportation development have been consulted and recommend refusal, and I appreciate Peter's pointed on that, but it's very, very rare for them to recommend refusal, especially given this is just an outline application, not a reserve matters one, which would suggest that actually those concerns must be very severe if they feel it should be refused at this stage rather than to be addressed through reserve matters. And then obviously we then have the fire service as well, which has been touched on, but they've got concerns too, which has led me to conclude that actually I think this is probably too dense a development for the location, given the concerns raised, and perhaps would it be more suitable to reduce the number of dwellings and have a better access and parking arrangements as a result of that?
Yeah, I agree with the fire service point. We need to hear more from officers about that. But I do note that it's in an area where family homes are wanted, and we need to offer more family homes. And part of the city where the demand for family homes is at, and we're offering that. So I think on balance, it might be one to accept.
Before we.
I do apologise. Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. On point 7.1, I note the density proposed is 26 dwellings per hectare. Typical for Birmingham is more like 40, and it's recommended for sustainable development, something more like 69. And so this is not a high density development.
I think, as everybody knows, we desperately need some more housing because, in the moment, there is very high list waiting people for the more housing. And there was only one house in there, and they are going to build up 7 houses. I think that's very useful for the future as well. And I am slightly concerned about, that trees. And if there is any space available near to that, they broad, trees should be planted. If there is any possibility for that, please. Thank you very much. Anyway, I am in favour of that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Can
Yes.
I bring Peter back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I'll cover the points to do with density and landscaping, and then I think if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll suggest that maybe Paul Cowan, my colleague from Transportation, picks up the highway issue.
Okay, fine.
On the issue of density, yes, you're quite correct. The report refers to
a high density of generation sustainable development, and
they're often sort of referred to within in terms of highly accessible locations. I think what's important here is it's still crucial to look at the character of the area, and what this application has sought to do is to find a density which is reflective of the existing character. Because if you were to go too far and have an overly intensive form of development with a much higher density, that could have a harmful impact on the character. So officers feel that the density being proposed here is akin to what's already there, particularly making reference to the more recent infill development at numbers 2A to 2D. In terms of landscaping, yes, so landscaping is covered by reserve matters, but certainly officers will be looking for tree planting and suitable landscaping as part of the reserve matters application. And in addition, we'll be looking for ecological enhancements as well as part of those schemes. As part of those a reserve matters application as well. Paul, I don't know if you'd like to pick up on it. Transportation points.
Thank you, Chair. It's an unusual point where we would advise a resistance at this moment, given an outline application, but for the access to be approved. But I think the crux of the matter is looking, as we always do, at the public consultation aspects on the application. What is the access figure? Is it simply that form that's forming within the existing highway at the moment, and we can treat the rest of the development that's not for further debate, for future discussion, or does the applicant believe that is the access as well? That's interlinked in terms of the practicality of the parking spaces, the layout, which I know is.
Is that realistic? Is that practical? They are narrow, and they are tandem, and there are concerns there given the wrong message. If we say that's why we ask for clarification, and a lot of those aspects have been clarified. So the rest, we've got new access.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Are you ready to make a decision on this, committee? Can I, the recommendations are in paragraph 9, which is on page 7 of the report. All those in favour of the application as it's before you?
2, 3, sorry, answer 6.
Those against? I verify the votes as those in favour 6, those against 3. Recommendations are therefore carried. And the application is approved. Can we move to the next application? Yeah, we're moving to the east area now. Item 11, which relates to the Abbey Rose Nursing Home, Orchard Road. I think, again, we've got members of the public here. So first of all, I'll ask the officers for updates, and then I'll invite objectors to come forward with the provision that they have 3 minutes to speak. As before, we'll remind people when 1 minute is up, and then I'll invite the supporter to come forward on the same conditions. So can we ask for any updates on this report?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. No, there isn't any updates on this report.
Okay. Can I therefore invite the objector to come forward? The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you, committee, for hearing my objections on behalf of local residents here today to this application, which would see the demolition of 5 buildings that used to be family houses before as a nursing home and could easily and affordably be restored back into family houses, which would also be better for the development, better for the environment, as well as meeting the Birmingham Development Plan 2017. I'd like to highlight a couple of policy issues which I think are relevant here. Policy TP30 of the Birmingham Development Plan highlights that development should be in character of the locality of mature suburbs. Page 22 highlights that the contribution that mature suburbs make to the quality and choice in the city's housing stock will continue to be maintained and enhanced. Policy TP35 highlights that the council should be preventing the loss to other uses through conversion or demolition of housing which is in good condition or could be restored to good condition at reasonable cost. And that's clearly the case here. Policy TP28, which talks about when new housing is being built, and it highlights it must be sympathetic to historical cultural assets in the local area. When you look at the report, page 2 shows you the incredibly bland and lacking in character proposals that the applicants put forward. This contrasts greatly to the final pictures in the report on page 14, which shows you what the site currently looks like. And that is reflected further down the road where those Victorian houses continue in similar style down the length of Orchard Road. It is very clear that the site is over-intensive and is completely out of character with the established built form of the road. The balconies on the front is completely out of character with the road as well. And you can see from the build line of the buildings, and I've got the big print out the map here that was submitted, how it is also out of line with the existing established build line of the rest of the properties and the existing properties on Orchard Road, a build line that's been in place for over 120 years. Turning to page 7 of the report, you can read under 7.5 that it highlights the loss of these historic buildings would represent a significant level of harm to the existing street scheme on Orchard Road and Orphanage Road. And while the applicant sets out their reasons for discontinuing the retention or conversion of the care homes, these are not sufficient reason alone to accept their demolition. 7.8 highlights the character of the area is that of a late 19th century suburb with large dwellings with generous plots set along well-defined build lines, and I've just touched upon the breaking of that build line that this proposal would do. Turning to 7.14 of the report, highlights that historic building recording would be required where consent is granted for proposals for loss of non-designated heritage assets, which would clearly be applicable here. This site is directly opposite the Victorian Grade 2 listed building. and also faces the historic environment record of the Erdington medieval village, and therefore the intense deep foundations that are proposed here, underground car park, usually only built in the city centre, would destroy any artefacts which are underneath these properties and would significantly damage the listed buildings' outlook opposite. The location is visible for hundreds of metres, in all directions, due to the nature of being on a crossroad, and it would block out the existent view of Orchard Road. Therefore,
thank you for your contribution. Thank you
very much, and ask the committee to reject the application.
Can I invite the supporter of the application to come forward? Again, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. We fully support the officer's report on this application, which carefully analyses all the relevant matters. This includes the development's impact on the character of the area, neighbouring amenity, heritage and conservation, ecology, parking and drainage, concluding that the proposal complies with the city development plan and relevant supplementary documents, including places for living and the mature suburbs SPD. The proposal would also assist the council in addressing its 5-year housing land supply shortfall, which, as you know, is as low as 3.15 years. This proposal will provide the reuse of a site which has been vacant for 3 years. It will deliver 33 1- and 2-bed flats suitable for smaller households, widening the choice in the housing stock in this part of Erdington. The design of the development has been carefully considered in the context of the site to be a proposal which can be properly integrated into the existing character of the area, and it is clearly supported by your own city design officer. The report fully assesses the proposal against the council's standards and very properly concludes the immediacy of residents will be protected. As you are aware, this application has been with the planning team since 2020. The proposed development has gone through a number of design amendments to address concerns raised, and the applicant has worked proactively with officers in addressing the concerns and working diligently to ensure an acceptable scheme can come forward. As you've heard, it incorporates basement parking, which in our view is a considerable benefit in that it removes parking from the street views and allows for increased landscaping along roads. The applicant has a local connection to Erdington, having owned and operated from this site for a number of years. Has given much thought to the nature of the development from its inception and through various iterations right up to the point now. The proposed development will create clear planning benefits over the existing situation, including creating employment opportunities during the construction phase and support for local businesses, including the high street, once it is occupied. You've heard reference to the mature suburbs and character, and I believe this has been fully assessed in the report before you. It is a carefully considered piece of design specific to this site. Overall, as the report sets out, the proposal is development plan compliant with no statutory consultancy objections and will bring forward a vacant site into life and deliver much needed new housing for the city. And as a result, I would commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I now invite members to make any comment? Oh, I do apologise. I should have asked for clarification from officers.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a number of issues which probably I need to say something about. Firstly, in connection with the impact upon the existing buildings, what you've got is a group of Victorian or early Edwardian villas reflecting the character of the area. 4 of the 5 villas are no longer in a residential use. And those 4 properties have retained some of the original features, like cresting of the ridge tiles, dental courses, etc., bay features. They make attractive period properties, but they are not considered to be worthy of a preservation order. They are listed as local assets. In other words, there's a recognition of their contribution towards the character of the area, but they're not specifically listed. The building opposite, the Conservative Club, has got a bowling alley in between it and the site, and is some distance away. The views of the council's conservation officer is that the proposed proposal will not impact upon that listed building. In terms of the loss of the existing heritage assets, that they are just his heritage assets. It's not in a conservation area, and they're not protected by a preservation order. They are attractive, but they are also pattern book type buildings, villas of a particular age, and they are not that uncommon in the Birmingham context. So we don't think that we could make a case for requiring their retention. In terms of the loss of the family dwellings, 3 of the villas have been converted into a care home. The care home ceased to operate about 3 years ago and has moved to other premises within the wider local area. Those 3 buildings have been adapted inside, which makes them difficult to reconvert, not impossible, but difficult to reconvert into dwellings. One of the 2 other properties was an office, so we're actually only looking at potential loss of 1 dwelling of family size in terms of that loss. Now, in terms of the character of the area and the building line, the corner at the moment is fairly weak, where the 2 villas meet on gables. What this proposal will do is step out towards the corner in a series of 6 bays which step out, and those bays will give a much stronger corner feature to the junction of Orphanage Road and Orchard Road, and so it's seen as articulating that corner plot with a particular design solution that makes efficient use of this urban site, which has good connections to the facilities in Erdington Town Centre, which in turn has bus and rail connections into the city centre. So we've looked fairly carefully at the way that the building is articulated, particularly the roofscape and how it steps down towards neighbouring properties. And in those terms, we think that this proposal in its revised form, which has been referred to, has respected the character and individuality of the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite members to comment or ask any questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I do know the site very well because it is in my ward, as I referred to earlier. At the training earlier in the week, we're all emphasising that we have to fully consider the heritage implications of any planning application. And I think it's worthwhile recording here in 7.5, it talks about these are a well-preserved group of Victorian properties, well-preserved being key there. And then it talks about the loss of these historic buildings would represent a significant level of harm to the existing streetscape on Orchard Road and Orphanage Road. So not only are these non-designated heritage assets in itself, we have a listed building opposite. This is all surrounded by other buildings of the same period, a number of Victorian buildings all along Orchard Road and some on Orphanage Road as well, who are all of themselves non-designated heritage assets. They're all built at a similar time period. They create a significant character. And what we have before us is basically a modern monstrosity bunged on the corner, which, as you can see from the CGI, has no character to it whatsoever, particularly compared to the rest of the road. It's very dull, it's very bland, it's very boring, and I don't see how the design put forward can be considered to be a significant positive benefit to outweigh the loss of these buildings, because the report makes it quite clear it's only the positive benefits outweighing the harm that, in officers' view, make this acceptable. And I don't see how this building is a positive contribution. Yes, we have the tilted balance. Yes, we need to deliver housing. And this could be reconverted into housing, or we could have a scheme which is much, much more sympathetic in design and character, which properly reflects the community of Erdington and its heritage, which at the moment it doesn't. So I don't see how there's any positivity which outweighs the harm that's been caused by the loss of these buildings and to the existing buildings that will be retained. So I cannot support this application.
You ready to vote?
Okay, sorry, I bring back the officers to respond to the point that Councillor Moore made.
Judgments about context and how things fit in are matters where there is scope for different opinions, but in officers' opinion, what we've got here is something which does respond to the local context in terms of the gables, the roof profile, so the stepping out towards the corner, the use of materials. It has references to the Erdington Skills Centre in Edward Street, and in that sense, officers are content that the revised scheme has responded to that local context. It's notable that it steps down in relation to number 40, which is at Orchard Road, which is an infill plot of a slightly different scale. The proposal will contribute towards a change in the profile of the housing mix profile of the area, providing a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom flats attractive to that area, and making efficient use of land and the contribution towards our housing land supply. So it's a matter of judgment in terms of how they respond to the context of that area, but in your officer's opinion, and it is an acceptable form of development.
Thank you.
Okay, the recommendations from officers are before you on in paragraph 9, which is on page 11 and 12 of the report. Can I see those members in favour? Those against? 2. So can I verify the votes as 7 members in favour and 2 members against, and the recommendations are therefore carried and the report is approved. Thank you. Move on to item. We're now on planning applications for the south area. The first one is item 12, West Longbridge West. So can I ask, first of all, for any updates on this case?
No updates, Chair. I was just going to summarise what this report was, because it's slightly different to the reports that members would have seen this morning, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, so this is actually a report back. This is an application down at Longbridge, an outline application for 350 houses. It was reported back to committee in February, where it was resolved to approve the application. It's subject to the signing of a legal agreement, what we call a Section 106 legal agreement. That legal agreement was to secure affordable housing, both on-site affordable housing and an off-site financial contribution. Everything else was debated in terms of the application and the suggested conditions, and it was resolved to approve. For various reasons, that legal agreement hasn't been signed, so the decision hasn't been issued on the application. Since February, we've had some new national policy requirements in terms of affordable housing. So if we are now delivering on-site affordable housing, we have to have a certain percentage of what is called first homes, which is a type of affordable housing. It's market housing that is offered at 30% discount. So this is a new type of affordable housing which we now need to incorporate if we're doing anything on site. So that now needs to be built into the legal agreement, and that's in addition to what we had back in February. So we've set out in the report what that means in terms of the different clauses. One of the things that it's changed is the total amount for the off-site contribution. Because the discount is 30%, which is more than we had before, we had a 20% discount on the affordable housing. It obviously impacts on the overall pot of money that can be offered for the off-site contribution. So you'll see in paragraph 1.2 that does come down from what was 1.42 million to 999,000, so just shy of £1 million for the off-site affordable contribution. Everything else stays the same in terms of the application and the conditions, but we are seeking members' approval to endorse that change in the clauses within the Section 106. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's now before members for questions or comments. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, so obviously this is a site of huge historical importance for Birmingham in terms of its heritage, and one that we need to get right in order to make the most of the available land there. A couple of questions in the first instance, or just observations. Again, I noticed the fire services concerned around the length, the area. I think it's good that there's homes there. There could have been more density, ideally. I mean, it's an area which is not far from a train station, good routes, public transport. Perhaps it could even be bolder. But overall, the idea to improve the cycling scheme around there, make use of the river, and use the green space is something to be welcomed. So I'm probably mindful to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. Thank you, Chair. I think that's a very good development due to this one, because we just really need 4 bedrooms, and there is very high waiting list for this one, because there are no any 4 bedrooms in this area. And I think section 106 there are none. So I'm in favor of that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Rainbow.
Just my concerns with having off-site funding is we need to build more housing across Birmingham. However, one of the massive problems with social housing is the land availability across the city. So while this obviously provides a lot of housing, and that's a really positive thing, my concern is where are those social houses going to be built? Because where is the space for them?
Questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Just picking up on the issue of the fire service comments, those have been fed back in detail to the applicant, and obviously that will come through in terms of the reserve matters. So we're just agreeing the principle at the moment rather than the detailed layout. And they'll obviously have to consult with our transportation colleagues to make sure that that complies both with the planning regulations but also building regulations respecting the fire service. Just touching on the issue of the density, that's something that we looked at carefully. I think in this particular case, because of the large amount of open space that's being delivered on the site, and obviously opening up the River Ray, the different cycle links, etc., that's taken up quite rightly a large amount of the site. So we're perhaps not delivering as many as you might have thought in terms of, if you just looked at the red edge within the application site, thought how many houses we deliver here. But I think that's the right balance in Longbridge. Obviously, there's the remainder of the sites that will come forward as part of the area action plan, which will be delivering more houses as well. But I think that in this particular case, because of the delivery of the on-site open space, we've got the right balance. When we get to the reserve matters, we'll look carefully at the mix of dwellings, obviously in terms of Mr. Azim's comment about the larger properties. We'll have a look at that as well to make sure that we've got that good mix. So what you see in the report at the moment is just an indication of what that mix might be. That will come forward with the reserve matters. Just in terms of the off-site affordable housing, we do see that a lot, and you will see that on a lot of reports in front of you, that financial contribution. I suppose that Birmingham is in a unique, fairly unique position and a positive position because we have the Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust. So that's where the money goes, and they will be delivering the affordable housing. They've obviously got a forward programme. They know those sites that will be delivered. And we're confident that they will be the right mix of social houses, and obviously they'll be looking at the sites, hopefully within that area, but it might go a little bit further than the specific Northfield constituency, if that's where the particular need is, but that's obviously part of their wider program.
Thank you very much. The recommendations are before you in paragraph 9, which is on page 13 and 14 of the reports. Can I see those members in favour of this, the recommendations? That's 9. I verify the vote as being unanimous with 9 votes for. That is that application is approved. Can we move to item 13, which is 189 Wheelie Avenue? Any clarifications from officers on that report?
No updates on this one, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I meant updates, didn't I?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll throw it open to members for any contributions or questions. Councillor Green.
One comment. I noticed from the document there have been several applications for this premises as a takeaway, and they're now saying a small restaurant with supplementary takeaway. Is this just an attempt to get around the rules?
Any other questions or comments? Bring the officer back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I don't know whether it's the same applicants putting in the applications, but you're right, there have been a number of refusals in the past for a takeaway. This application is for a restaurant, but as members will know, restaurants can have ancillary takeaways. Most of them do. Obviously, we've seen through the pandemic a greater use of that in terms of home deliveries and then extending those takeaways. So yes, they can still do that. So if members grant permission for a restaurant this morning, you need to be aware that yes, they can operate an ancillary takeaway. If it gets to the point where that takeaway becomes more of the primary use, so they stop the ability for people to be able to eat within the premises, they take the tables, etc., then that's something we'd need to look at, because it might start moving over into a hot food takeaway. That doesn't fall within the same use class of a restaurant. That would need its own planning permission. So we'd have to have a look at that from an enforcement point of view. But as it is at the moment, you've got to take it at face value. It's an application for a restaurant.
Okay, the recommendations before you in paragraph 9 on page 7 of the report. Can I see those members in favour? Verify that as 9 votes in favour, which is unanimous. That application is approved. Can we move to item 14 relating to St Augustine's Road, Edgbaston? And can I invite the officer to give any updates on this?
Yes, just one update, Chair. Paragraph 5.1, it should read that there are 5 objection letters rather than 3. Right. No new issues raised.
Okay, can I throw that open to members for questions or contributions?
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly torn on this one because, in principle, I don't really have an issue with the guest house use, but I am aware from Airbnbs that have operated in Erdington that they can cause problems of antisocial behaviour and crime, and sometimes security as well. And I note that there are objections here from Councillor Rice and Preet Gill, and their concern is in relation to the proposed operator, assuming that the information is correct within the report. So I know the police, I believe, are content with it, but I just want to make sure that that issue has been fully considered, because it certainly seems from my experience, it's because there's no one on site to keep an eye on these people that they seem to think that they can get away with more than would otherwise be the case. Like, particularly if you had a hotel, you'd at least have a front of house that's of some description, whereas according to the description here, there is none of that at all.
Marshall.
Yeah, again, similar to that, I think in terms of a single application, there's nothing really an issue with this. Again, it's just thinking of wider picture of what else is in the area and how antisocial behaviour and other issues might be affected by it. I guess I'm going to lean towards what the police say, and who seem to be happy with it, but yeah, one that I'm unsure of which way to go.
Yeah, I'd just like to add the same comment made about the antisocial behaviour. I think from my experience as well with the MUB board, people are affected by dealing with this. I think again, if there are reports to show that there isn't a significant level of it, then I'm quite happy. Otherwise, I have a reservation on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Can I bring the officer back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers. So yes, obviously that issue has been looked at comprehensively with the determination of the application, consultation with the police. As it's noted, they've no specific objections. They're very aware of some of the issues that are happening locally, some of the premises that are quite close by, so they're very aware of that. It is a fairly low scale application, a low key application. It's just the 9 guest suites, a change of use from the 9 self-contained flats into the 9 bedrooms. So it's a fairly small proposal in that sense. And I guess it is more akin to a service department because there's no specific on-site facilities. There's no dining facilities, for example. They've got their own kitchenettes. So in sort of external terms, there's no real change. They're not changing anything internal. It's a very low scale change of use, actually, from the flats to the guest house. So we do think that it is acceptable. Obviously, if issues do arise, then they will have to be referred locally to the police in terms of any antisocial behaviour problems.
Thank you. The recommendation is before you in item 9, page 6 of the report. Can I see those in favour? Any against? 7 no votes against. So I verify that as. We take abstentions as well. Abstentions? Sorry.
Starting the time declared. I couldn't.
Sorry. Yeah, there was 7 votes in favour. Sorry, let's take that again for clarification. Can I see all those in favour again, please?
I think when it was 8.
Okay. 8 votes in favour and no votes against. I declare, sorry, I'm verifying that as being carried. The application approved. Can we move on to city centre application, starting with item 15, land at Lower Essex Street. Can I ask for updates on this report?
Yeah, there's one update, thank you, Chair. So this is from Councillor Moore, who's just left the room. He's provided some further correspondence. His principal concern is to ensure that the proposed community space is delivered, as this benefit would offer to outweigh the harm caused by the scheme, and would offer a direct benefit to the LGBT community. And the wording of the section 106 is strong enough to avoid any potential nagging on that agreement. His other concern is the need to make sure that noise mitigation is up to standard, given the proximity of the redevelopment to 3 late-night entertainment venues in the gay village. He states that he's had the opportunity to see the noise mitigation that's been installed on the Timber Yard scheme, which is just across the way, and would hope that it is proposed that its development is equal to that or better in order to avoid any potential noise complaints in the future. So my response to those points is that you're seeing that the resolution at the end of the report requires the provision of the community space, which is intended to be occupied by the LGBT office, but does allow a fallback position to other charities if that isn't possible for whatever reason. But that is certainly the intent, that they will be the occupier, and they are in discussion to the applicant. And on the issue of noise, the mitigation proposed is bespoke to this scheme and is tailored to obviously the acoustic environment that's around it. The scheme has had significant scrutiny by the city's regulatory services officer and includes real-world monitoring of those venues to determine that strategy that's been put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I throw it open for questions or comments? Councillor Martin.
So I note the schemes in what I would class as a very important part of our city. Often we want to protect the LGBT plus community and the vibrant nightlife that is around there. So I feel like the mitigation in place for the development in terms of noise is adequate, although I'm not sure why someone would want to buy a window where you can't open it to mitigate the noise, but if they know that in advance, then that's on them. I am, however, disappointed that the money that the Sport England suggests be part of the development has not been part of the overall proposal. Although I see the reasons why, and I still feel that people being more active and having opportunities to take part in sports and activities, facilities is important, especially in a region that has such high obesity levels, particularly amongst younger people as well. But there are some good points to the scheme. I think it looks okay. It's the public square improvements are really welcomed. And subject to conditions, and I do say this with subject to conditions, getting the charity in the lower unit, it'd been great if it'd been an even longer leash, but I'm sure that's been part of the negotiations, is important.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? Can I therefore bring the officer back to comment?
Thank you for that. So in terms of the noise environment, yes, you can see that the worst case scenario is that up to 150 units on this scheme would need windows and could not be openable. Clearly that is not an optimal solution, but we have to be very cautious in terms of the impact that this could have on the gay village and those venues in particular that are central to that offer to the city. So we feel that it's the right strategy, and you'll see through the conditions that where the evidence allows it, we will hope to reduce that number further, but we'll only do that if the data suggests that that's the right thing to do. And there's also conditions requiring commission testing to make sure once it's built, it actually achieves the level of mitigation that it said it would. So I think there's suitable controls in there. In terms of the Section 106, obviously the scheme can only sustain so much contribution, and as with many schemes, we have to balance one ask versus another. And yes, Sport England have requested a contribution, but we feel that considering our affordable housing need, that takes primacy here basically, and hence the recommendation for you. And obviously we've got the community use in there as well with 10 years, which is the discount, which is the period that has been agreed with the developer at a 50% discount, which I think is a significant contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask votes in favour of this application? Eight votes in favour, any against? There aren't any other members present actually, so that's, I'd verify the vote as eight in favour and no votes against, so the application is therefore approved. Can I move to item 16? Corner of Princip Street and Lower Lovedale Street. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, so on item 16, Princip Street, there are no updates, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Can I throw this open to members for discussion? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check because I note obviously there is significant heritage implications in that, and there is listed an objection from, it says BCC Conservation. There doesn't appear to be any other consultation responses from any other heritage bodies, so I just wanted to check were they actually consulted, because it seems strange if heritage is such a concern and given it's a city centre location, they do normally comment, and I believe they have commented on applications within the Gun Quarter in the past, and so I was surprised to not see anything from them. So can you just double check that did actually take place?
Any other question?
Yeah, so the Gun Quarter, I think it's an area of Birmingham that has potential to be just like the Jewellery Quarter, and I think this development adds to that long-term plan of making good use of an area of our city centre with good proximity to local transport and the core for employment opportunities.
Any other questions or contributions? Can you respond to
Yeah, of course. So in terms of heritage, you're quite right. Often we'll get comments from Victorian Society, Civil Society, and Historic England being the government's advisory body on heritage. In this instance, the assets that are affected are Grade 2 listed, and it's only their setting that's affected, and therefore that wouldn't trigger consultation with those bodies. In terms of where we fetched up in terms of heritage, so the principle of removal of the existing building is a positive for those heritage assets. The existing building is definitely a detractor for their setting, and that the overall scale of the development creates less than substantial harm to the setting of those assets, which is then offset against the public benefits that you'll see at para 8.2. I think it's worth saying in terms of scale, this is up to 6 stories. Obliquely opposite this scheme, you have the new Barclay Home scheme, which is 6 stories. So I think there's definitely a story there in terms of that relationship. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations for approval are set out in paragraph 9. Can I see those members in favour? 9. It is unanimous. There are no votes against, so I verify it at that and confirm that the planning application is approved. Thank you. Can we move to item 17, which is the plot F, Paradise Circus?
Thank you, Chair. So there's just one update on this item, and it's a response to the Victorian Society's objection that you'll see summarised in the report from the applicant. So they note that the concerns relate to the height of the building, its siting in relation to the town hall, and the use of red metal and terracotta as materials. And they also note that the principal amenity group for the town hall is the Georgian group, and that they've been consulted but not responded. So the applicant states that in respect of height and scale and massing of the building, this has been approved through this previous section 73 application amending the outline granted in the March just gone. In determining the application, obviously City Council weighed the lesser substantial harm to that against public benefits for the scheme, noting that we must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the special interest and setting of listed buildings. The design and approach justification has been set out through their pre-application consultation exercise that they did, including the Victorian Society in particular. And the design intent for this building has always been to continue the character of Paradise by creating an object building that is complementary to its surroundings but distinctive, with abstract references to the classical Victorian architecture around there. For 3 Chamberlain, references were drawn from terracotta buildings nearby, and creating distinctive base, middle and top to the building, which responds to the approach the town hall takes. The applicant's intent was to ensure that the building was contemporary, did not seek to replicate or provide a pastiche of those historic buildings, and that the heritage statement concludes that it would result in less than substantial harm, and the city's conservation officer agrees with that conclusion. They also make reference to design changes that have taken place since the application was submitted, and that they consider they do not detract from the overall vision and concept of the building, and reference the fact that no objections have been raised by Historic England in relation to those changes, and that the council's design officer has confirmed that overall the form of the building should be commended and will deliver a bespoke and individual architecture. They draw reference to the fact there's a condition which requires detailed materials, sample strategy to be agreed with the city to ensure that the highest quality materials are used. And then finally, they add that the NPPF is clear that we should apply great weight to the conservation of heritage assets, and that the more important the asset, the greater the weight should be, irrespective of the level of harm. So obviously the town hall is grade 1 listed, so that needs to be taken into consideration in our decision. The identified harm obviously should then be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal that's set out in the report, 7.21. Bear in mind the considerable importance and weight that must be given to the statutory duties under the Planning and Listed Building Conservation Areas Act.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Throw it open to members for questions or comments. Are you prepared to vote without any further? Okay. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 9, subject to the conditions also laid out in that paragraph. Can I see those in favour? Nine votes in favour, no votes against. That is unanimous. So the application is approved. Item 18, relating to 215 Bradford Street.
Thank you, Chair. So, like the item we had earlier in the South of the City, this is a report back, so it's indicated before. It's to account for first homes, which you've had a brief explanation of earlier, and it also seeks to introduce an either-or scenario of for sale or rental. And the city's independent financial consultants looked at that and confirmed that the rented or there's no difference overall, and it's all acceptable. They've also confirmed that the commuted sum in lieu of affordable housing would be £222,054.47, and therefore it is proposed to amend that part of the resolution at AII and the third bullet point to read as follows. So a commuted sum of £222,054.47, index linked from the 16th of June 2022 in lieu of first homes to a discount of 30% on the 4 units. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, that report and recommendations are before you. Questions or comments?
I think it's a really good scheme. I think it contrasts well with other developments. Well.
Okay, I'm going to put it to you. The recommendations are in paragraph 8. All those in favour? No votes against. That is, I'll verify that as the voting, and that the planning application is approved. Move on to item 19, land off Curzon Street.
Yes, I've got one update, Chair. Thank you. So we've had some additional comments from the Canals and Rivers Trust since the report was made. They confirm that the additional welded weathering steel plate to prevent birds perching on the particular parts of the structure is an acceptable solution. They have some concerns over the wire system in terms of bird roosting deterrent, in terms of it being a change in material, its effectiveness, its maintenance, and precedence for its use in other similar structures. And feel that a design solution that sort of out-designs the potential for birds roosting would be the preferred option. And they also raised concerns that the current runoff channel from the pier and the plinth shouldn't face towards the canal. In response to that, I'm satisfied that those issues have been addressed through the conditions proposed in the report. Canals and Rivers Trust have undertaken an assurance for the features too, which is separate to what we could consider on the schedule 17. And for me, Chair, I'd just like to remind members, this is very different report. For those of you who've seen this one, this isn't agreed under the Town Country Planning Act. This is under the HS2 consenting regime, which is different, and we are limited to considering only those matters under Schedule 17 of that Act. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments from members? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have an issue with the application, but I don't think the CGI is particularly reflective because there's no graffiti on any of it. And it's quite clear that we're going to be building a massive canvas for graffiti artists to decorate. Now, I don't know whether that's something within the scope of this committee in our decision making, but I do think it's something that needs to be factored in because it will happen. I remember the bridge in Celio didn't last very long before people graffitied that when it was repainted. And so obviously there are concerns, I've got concerns that this is going to be a giant canvas. So I do think if possible that is factored in, whether that's in the building material or some sort of maintenance programme to try and stop graffiti, because there's going to be an awful lot of space for people to decorate. And unfortunately it will bring the area down, sadly.
H2 is a really important scheme to be viable for transport.
I guess my not concern, it's just the size of it. I don't, again, from CGI, I don't think it comes across quite the size of, you don't have an aerial sort of view of it, so you don't have to get the full picture, but there's nothing wrong with the application, I don't think, overall.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to make the comment really that, we've got a lot of rail lines coming in already into that area. So it's not really going to be detrimental, isn't it? It's an important project to support HS2 and therefore being mindful to support the application.
Thank you. Anything else?
So I would say graffiti is something that we do constantly have a conversation with HS2 about. They are quite firm and say that they have a zero tolerance of graffiti, and they have a maintenance regime that they would adhere to on their structures going forwards. In addition, it is a unique consenting regime as to how we look at HS2 matters. So the underside of the viaduct is something that will come through in the future, and it could well be that as we design in what's going to go under there, that also has an impact on how that is dealt with.
Thank you. The recommendations are in paragraph 9. Can I see all those in favour? 9 votes. That is unanimous. Verify it as unanimous. So the application is approved subject to the conditions in the report. Item 20. Any other urgent business?
Sorry, members of the planning committee, we will be later on this afternoon putting some extra dates in your diary for the pre-application meetings where members who have been on the committee before, a space where we can present to you, or the applicants present to you, some of the larger schemes, so you get, whilst they're in pre-app, so that you get an understanding of them before they're presented to you at planning committee. I think Julie's going to be putting them in the diary this afternoon, is that right? And we've got the first for the 7th of July. So just a note on that.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other urgent business? Therefore, item 21, agree the necessary authority to chair and officers. Agreed. Thank you for your attendance.